Hi, I'm Mark Ray, and welcome to Honourable Mentions, a podcast where each episode a special guest will talk to me about a video game that, for whatever reason, doesn't quite make their all-time list, but does warrant greater celebration. Sage. Noun. A profoundly wise man. That's the best word I could find in the dictionary to describe our next guest. Known for his incisive comment and vast knowledge of all things video gaming, as well as being one of the founders of the excellent Cane and Rinse podcast, I got to spend an enlightening Sunday evening in the company of Mr. Leon Cox. Here's what he had to say about his honourable mention. Leon, thank you so much for answering the call and being my guest on Honourable Mentions.
My pleasure. Thanks for asking me.
Fantastic. Right. The first question I normally ask people is what their game, that basically what is the list of their all-time games, you know, but like a getting to know you thing. But I want to ask you a question first. Are you one for making lists? Are you a list maker? Like we had James Carter on a couple of episodes ago. He's a very big list maker and he had spreadsheets. Are you a list man?
So I am. Traditionally, I have been. In some ways, I shouldn't admit to this because one of the things that we do on my podcast, Cane and Rinse, is that we deliberately avoid lists and ranking things in some sort of hierarchy. But traditionally, yes, I'm a massive nerd with spreadsheets, and I've got lists of games that I've owned and played going back a long time. I have attempted like all-time favorite game lists in the past, but
really,
as I've got older and as I've played more games, it's got harder and harder. And I kind of decided at some point that sort of measuring up chalk versus cheese and sort of didn't make much sense. But that's not to say that what I did for this show was knowing that you were probably going to ask me that question was pretty much just from memory rather than and in no particular order. I just I thought
go for a feel.
Yeah, my favorite games by level of affection and feel. And so that forms itself. It's not that you could necessarily say one is better than the other, but for whatever reason, either at the time or still today now, these are games that made me happy or continue to make me happy in some profound way. So, and the game I've chosen for the thing, I won't reveal it yet.
Yeah, not yet.
Is as I understood the idea would exist just outside that sort of that top tier, that upper echelon. Yeah.
That's right. So let's get to your list then.
Okay.
No particular order.
Yep.
What's on your list?
Okay, well, it starts in the very early 80s with Galaga. The Namco vertically scrolling, well, sort of not scrolling, it's static really, but it was the sequel to Galaxian.
Right.
And it still gets released regularly by Namco. It's recently come out on PS4 and Xbox One. You can play it on everything. It's been put on a million compilations. So as always, some versions are better and more authentic than others, but it's been with me. I didn't actually play it when it was brand new. I just didn't see it in the arcades until I was about 14, so it was already a few years old.
Right.
But as soon as I played it, I fell in love with it, and I still absolutely love it. Like, I can play it. I could put it on the PS4 now and play it all evening, and I would still get an absolute buzz out of trying to beat my high score. So it would. Funnily enough, I went into. I've done a few sort of guest lectures at colleges, and one of the talking to further education students about games and what I do and how I, started doing what I do with a podcast and that sort of thing. One of the games that came up from some of these youngsters is a game that they obviously, it was from way before they were born, but a game that they still have respect for was Galaga. So I was very pleased to hear that.
Oh, that's great. Yeah, that's great to see that it sort of transcends the ages sort of thing.
Yeah, I think some of these do. If this is in any kind of order, and it's not actually contiguous, but if there's anything, it's kind of, I thought back sort of on, to the earlier days and then kind of worked my way forward. So my next true love was a game called Drop Zone, which is from the mid-'80s. It's by a guy called Archer McLean, who also made International Karate and IK Plus.
Yes.
And it's effectively it's a shameless clone of Defender, which was obviously Eugene Jarvis's amazing wraparound, horizontally scrolling arcade shoot 'em up. But it was a home version for the Atari 8-bit and Commodore 64, and I had the Atari version.
Right.
And it was just ludicrously atmospheric and playable. There were various sequels on 16-bit consoles, and it even got a PlayStation 1 port, but none of the versions were ever quite the same.
No.
He used to shove it in. Of course, Archer McLean became probably best known for his snooker games.
That's it.
Jimmy White's, and then
the pool game as well.
Yeah, and the pool game, Pool Paradise.
That's it.
And they used to stick Drop Zone in there as a little Easter egg under emulation, but the emulation was always a bit ropey, so it was always, and the controls would dodge. So, but I still play it sometimes on Atari 8-bit emulation on my PC, and it's still absolutely superb.
Oh, fantastic. So what else is on there?
Well, I've got. You have to realise I've been playing games for 40 years or whatever, so I've got quite a few. Feel free to edit.
Oh no, don't worry. Go crazy.
But yeah, Bubble Bobble would be next.
Yes.
The 1986 Taito platformer, and also Rainbow Islands, which came after that.
Fantastic.
Both those two games, I was so happy when because Hamster Corporation, Japanese company, keep releasing these arcade archives games for PS4.
That's a great name, isn't it? Hamster Corporation.
It's superb, yeah, and they've got rights to various old coin-op series,
right,
by people like Taito and Konami, and they recently re-released Bubble Bobble, and it's pretty much arcade, absolutely perfect, which has been a problem because legend has it that Taito lost the original ROM at some point for Bubble Bobble. So for years, the only official version, or the only version you could play on MAME was a sort of bootleg.
Oh, right.
And it was close, but it had some alterations, and I think the version that's on PS4 now is pretty much exactly as the arcade was. So really? I don't know if they reverse engineered it or someone found the chips or whatever, but
coupled it again together from various ROMs.
But yeah, I think that and Rainbow Islands are both timeless and magical and adorably cute and still challenging and pretty much as playable as they were on the days they were released. Another one that goes for would be, and this is obviously a genre and a series, but I always single out Street Fighter Alpha 2 or Street Fighter 02 as being the peak of my fighting game love. And,
so this is the second choice of Street Fighter in this series so far?
Sure, yeah. This is very specifically the 1996 game, so this was the second game in the Alpha series, which was a prequel to Street Fighter 2, but came after it. And it was a massive refinement on the first Street Fighter Alpha and added loads of features and characters. And I still think it's absolutely I love Street Fighter 4, 5, but 02 is still my one love. Yeah, absolutely. Same year, I think, was again a long series with a lot of entries, now no longer with us, but specifically Saturn Bomberman, the Sega Saturn version of Bomberman. It was, the Super Nintendo Bombermans and the PC Engine Bombermans are fantastic games. But the Saturn version had sort of it was still pixel art, but it had higher res graphics, it had CD music, and it had the most amazing 10-player mode. If you had 2 multi-taps,
brilliant,
you could force it into high res. And
I bet that was carnage.
It was absolute carnage. Yeah, you could play it on a big old. You needed a big old telly, and my dream gaming pad that I still haven't got. I haven't got the money or the space for, but one day I will have a permanently set up giant, whatever the biggest cathode ray tube television I can find is, with old consoles plugged in, and Saturn Bomberman will be there with 2 multi-taps and 10 controllers, always ready for party time.
You're a man after my own heart. I'm currently building a den as we speak, and I have I've got one console from every generation so far.
Nice.
And I'm now getting into the realms where it's only stuff like that I can do now, where it's kind of like I've got to have a station set up specifically for Bomberman with the joysticks and stuff. Totally. Man after my own heart.
Magic. I'll be around.
Lovely.
Be around on Tuesday.
So looking back at your sort of list so far, there's a lot of sort of arcade experiences.
Mm-hmm.
Would you say that's your one kind of real true love at the end of the day? You know, you can go through all. See, I was expecting you to come on and speak about a game that's full of, you know, narrative and wonderful storytelling and you know that kind of thing. And then looking at your list, it's very obvious that you are seriously into your kind of. I mean, having said that, you are also all over my leaderboards on any arcade game that ever comes out, like Pac-Man and that kind of stuff, and Resogun. You're all over that, and it's just like, no, Leon loves his arcade games. Is that fair to say?
Yeah, absolutely. I grew up, you know, my formative video game experiences, apart from a few times I would go round at like a friend's house, normally a better off friend than my family, but it was like they would have one of those TV game consoles. So they would have like, you know, a grandstand or a Binatone or whatever, 10 in 1. Yeah. So it would be like Pong, but lots of variations of Pong, and it would normally be on a black and white screen. But then between sort of that and when my friends started getting Spectrums and Commodore 64s, it was Space Invaders. I think Space Invaders I would probably still class as the single one most important video game that ever was made. Yeah. Even ahead of Tennis for Two and Computer Space, which without those perhaps nothing would exist. But Space Invaders was the one which kind of
completely blew the doors off, didn't it?
It did, yeah. Set the mold. It was a proper phenomenon, and in the wake of that followed the arcade boom of the 80s. And yeah, that was, you know, I grew up. I was a child. I was you know 6 years old when Space Invaders came out. I probably played it, you know, in a social bar or a chip shop or something. You know, as a kid, being hoisted up or popped on a stool. And then it was, you know, Asteroids and Pac-Man and everything else. And yes, as soon as I was old enough to go, because I grew up in Brighton, still live in Brighton.
Oh, fantastic.
And we had every arcade machine that was released ever. We had so many arcades. There was an entire street called West Street, which is now mainly restaurants, coffee shops and nightclubs. It had nightclubs then, but all down one side. It was literally, I think it was 7 or 8 consecutive arcades, and then you went down to the beach and there were 7 or 8 down there, and there was the pier which had 2 massive arcades on it. It was arcade heaven growing up. So
we've got 2 seaside boys on this recording then, because I'm from Southend. So
Southend, indeed, yes.
Exactly.
I can tell by the accent.
Exactly. The terrible accent that I'm trying to not have come through at all times.
You should be proud of it. It's your roots.
Right. Yeah, true. But did you ever do that thing where it's just literally you were just doing laps of different arcades?
I think, yeah, I have so many memories, and I still, you know, I work in Brighton. I've decided to stay here, live here, live here with my partner, and I love the city. Still, it's become more and more expensive, more and more hipster, more and more gentrified. But it's still one of my favourite places in the country, if not the world, because it's very bohemian. It's very left leaning and liberal minded, and that suits me. And every time I go downtown, I still have this little urge. You know, I often go near the seaside, and I have this genuine pang of what if all the arcades were suddenly back?
Oh, that'd be amazing.
My dream would be to open a retro arcade, but I don't have the capital, and I don't have the mechanical skills or the physical skills to kind of maintain machines, which is an art unto itself.
Yeah, is it Steve Lynn, the guy in the States who is the kind of arcade guy?
Yeah, and Archer McLean, who I mentioned earlier,
really?
who made Drop Zone. He's a restorer of printed circuit boards, and he used to write a column in Retro Gamer Mag, and he would talk about how he would do all this laser etched art and all this stuff, and that's just way beyond me. So if I got if I could just buy all the machines in good condition and set up a coffee bar, you know, drinking, eating, meeting place that also had like all my favorite coin ops of all time in it, that would be the ultimate dream come true. But I'd need, I'm going to need like $250,000 quid or something to do it. So
well, you never know. There's always the lottery.
Yeah. If I played it, I might have a chance.
There you go. So one question on the arcades then, as like a supplemental question. What was the name of the big arcade, the one? Because for me, it was always Mr. B's. What was yours called?
I don't actually remember what
they
were called. They were all called things like Crystal Leisure. And so it sounded more like, I don't know, brothels.
Nice.
But they tended to be called some like like a pair of like A&H Leisure or stuff
Right.
like that. So for me, my very favourite arcade, the one where I used to play Gallagher and other things like Jackal and Alien Syndrome and Juno First, and I could go on,
Yeah.
was down under to, if you're looking at the famous pier, the one
Yes.
that's still standing, the Palace Pier, the Brighton Pier, it was just down and to the left,
Okay.
right on the seafront.
On the seafront,
under there.
yeah.
It's where the Brighton Wheel was until recently, which has now moved on.
Right. Okay.
And yeah, it had no name as far as I know.
Right.
It was just that, it was that arcade. It was the arcade.
Yeah, it was that archway.
Yeah, totally. And and the pier, and there was the Palace Pier, and then at the back of the Palace Pier was the thing they called in a very 80s fashion the Pleasure Dome. Again, sounds like a house of ill repute, but was actually full of wonderful video games.
Brilliant. So let's get to your game. Now, you've already kind of sort of given it away, but I'm going to let you sort of let us know what it is. So let everyone know, what is the game that you have picked today?
Okay, so very specifically, it's one in a long series of games. Very specifically, it is the second game in the Puzzle Bobble series, Puzzle Bobble 2, also known over here as Buster Move 2 Arcade Edition.
That's it. Which also, confusingly, I found that I had a copy of this that I didn't know I had.
Oh, nice.
Which was, but it's called Buster Move and it's a platinum game. It's on platinum. Now, what confused me is it says Buster Move on the case, and I thought, okay, brilliant, I'll put that in. But when it comes up with the attract screen, Buster Move 2 Arcade Edition.
Right.
What is the deal with that?
No idea. Because the original Buster Move wasn't ported to PS1.
No.
Puzzle Bobble. It came out. It was an arcade game, and it was a Neo Geo based arcade game. So you can play it you could play it in the arcades or at home, and it would be the same. It did come to 3DO and Game Gear, and there was a Super Nintendo version in Japan, but that was it. It was the second go round that made it to PS1 and Saturn. Right. So I guess maybe they just rebranded it for the re-release just to save any confusion. I don't know.
Yeah, maybe. Like I say, it was renamed in Europe, wasn't it? But everywhere else, and the US, I believe. Yeah.
Well, the thing is that we got so in Japan, the game Buster Move is the dancing game, the rhythm action game that became Buster Groove over here.
Oh, okay.
So yeah, it was all a bit silly. But why they just didn't stick to Puzzle Bobble, I don't know, because Puzzle Bobble is a great name.
Yeah,
exactly. And later on in the series, I think they went back to Puzzle Bobble. I think for the most recent version I've seen of this is on the new Facebook Messenger games. There's recently come out, so there's Gallagher's on there, but it's unplayable pretty much, and a few other, Pac-Man, a few other classic retro games. But there's also a vaguely presentable version of Puzzle Bobble, and it is called Puzzle Bobble. So,
right.
Yeah.
Fantastic.
But nomenclature aside, it's as in my heart it's Puzzle Bobble, but the version I have here, and I have the very copy. Actually, this was my second copy because this is a Value Series release. I got rid of it at some point and then realised that was a terrible mistake. So
we've all done it. We've all done it.
Yeah. So Buster Move 2 Arcade Edition, released by Acclaim. The long since defunct Acclaim.
Oh, this is brilliant. This is brilliant because I put a little teaser out on Saturday of me playing this, and it comes up with the Acclaim logo, and I thought, I wonder if people will be savvy enough to get this. And I had all kinds of names, and no one got it. No one picked Buster Move.
Okay, all right.
So yeah, very, 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 very sort of under the radar. This one. This is a good pick. I like it.
Yeah.
So you said earlier about Bubble Bobble and Rainbow Islands. You absolutely love that series. So what is it about that series that really you have such an affinity for? What is it? What draws you in?
Combination of the intense cuteness of it, without ever being kind of sickly sweet. I felt like just really, really beautiful pixel art. Both the aforementioned platformers featured literally hundreds and hundreds of different collectible items that were all made up in very small grids of however many pixels it is, 8x8 if that. I'm not. Probably 8x8, and they all looked absolutely delicious. And the characters, Bub and Bob, the dinosaurs in the first game, were just stupid adorable, and all the enemies in Rainbow Islands, and the incredibly jaunty music.
Oh yeah, I was going to say to you about this.
Yeah.
That Bust a Move has some great music.
Yeah, absolutely, and that goes through this series as well. And I think mainly, these are by Taito. This is the stable who made Space Invaders, among others. They knew what they were doing in the arcades, and these games are just incredibly crisp and responsive and precise to feel. But mainly, especially in the case of Bubble Bobble and Rainbow Islands, they have astonishing depth. Like the stuff that's going on behind the scenes is fairly mind-boggling.
Okay.
In terms of it calculating things that you've done and then giving you different collectibles and power-ups depending on not only your game but previous games that have been played on the machine since it was powered on and stuff like this. It's there's a lot going on in those two games. Less so in Puzzle Bobble. It's more straightforward.
I was going to say that just for anyone who hasn't played the game, you just kind of give us a brief overview of the mechanics, what the game is, what it's about, and any of the kind of depth that's come over from the kind of Bubble Bobble and Rainbow Island series.
Yeah, so back at this stage, the series it was pretty straightforward stuff. It's you control Little Bub or Little Bob or one of the other characters possibly. Oh, in later games you could start to control all of them, but at this stage it was your little bubble blowing brontosauruses. But instead of blowing the bubbles, they've got a little bubble firing machine, and the bubbles are racked up at the bottom. You've got this adorable little clockwork machine. You wheel it left and right and you fire bubbles up the screen, and the idea is that you match three coloured bubbles or more. Every so often, every few turns, the entire row, all the rows of bubbles at the top shift down, and if they go below the line at the bottom, it's game over. So there's elements of there are sort of elements of Space Invaders, although that was more. There was a game they did after this called Pop and Pop, which is basically Space Invaders but cute with balloons. But this one also has elements of sort of Breakout or Arkanoid.
Arkanoid, I was going to say,
yeah. But the idea is that you're clearing three at a time or more. But because they're all the bubbles that are coming down the screen are glued together effectively in like honeycomb hexagons.
That's it.
If you break off, if you pop three together,
it's the foundation. If you take the foundation away of a big clump of bubbles, it will fall away and you get more points. Is that right?
Well put. You get more points, and if you're playing two-player, you throw more stuff at the other player and speed up their doom kind of thing. So
this is played side by side simultaneously as opposed to on two separate screens.
Yeah, or you can just play the machine, try and get to the highest level and level speed up and you get more different coloured bubbles and so on and so forth. Or there's a versus mode, of course, against the CPU.
Right.
And as the series went on, I think there ended up being about another 8 or 9 games in the main series after 2, which is the one we're focusing on.
Yeah.
And they added more and more different gimmicks and types of bubble, and that wasn't necessarily, I thought, it's classic video game series stuff. Keep adding to it until the kind of purity's lost a bit. So
it becomes a bloated mess at some point. It's always the way. Yeah.
Mm.
Now, one thing I found with this, I found it on Friday afternoon, and I've been playing it all day Saturday. That's as much as I've played of Bust a Move, which is gutting because I've really enjoyed it.
Good, glad to hear it.
It's brilliant. But the one thing I had, the biggest takeaway I had from it is it me or is the AI incredibly challenging on this game?
I think it shows its arcade roots there. So I think what happens is the first CPU is ludicrously easy, and like you couldn't lose to it if you were trying because it's very, very slow and unintelligent. But I think it's one of those games where this is a 20-year-old arcade game. The idea is that they don't want you standing at the machine for more than however many minutes it is.
Exactly.
So there's some quite challenging AI a few levels in. However, it's a bit of a hump. If you get past that hump, things soften up a bit. I've completed the game any infinite number of times.
I didn't doubt that, Leon, to be honest. I did not doubt that for 1 second. I've seen your scores on Resogun. They frighten me.
Yeah, I'm not top of all my leaderboards, but there's a few friends who there's one or two people I've got beef with. they're too good, especially at Geometry Wars. But I do like score chasing. It's one of the greatest things about the modern era of gaming for me is online leaderboards.
Yeah.
And it's good to know that other people do actually, like yourself, pay attention to them.
Oh, yeah, massively. Unfortunately, I'm incredibly competitive. And
right.
Yeah, it's one of those things where I start getting anxious if I'm sort of near the top and I'm above. But like I've got some times on Trackmania Turbo at the moment, and I'm genuinely like I check it every day just in case someone's beating my times, because I can't take it.
You'll have to take it back. You'll have to
exactly. I have to. It's wrong.
But that's such fun. I mean, that is very much like the old the old arcade high score culture.
That's it was
like sometimes we had to write our scores down because it didn't always keep them, but that was very much what it was all about. Magazines used to have high score listings and things like that.
Absolutely. Yeah, I remember track and field was mine.
Oh, really? I was always terrible at that.
Yeah, no, it was track and field. We'd go down there and it, sort of every kind of Saturday we'd go down, check our scores, make sure they were still there. All that kind of stuff.
That's right. That had some sort of backup, didn't it? Because it kept world records on there, didn't it?
Yes, it did. It did. So that was quite sad. But look at us, 2 40-year-old blokes going, "No, I remember back in the days."
Well, there's a lot of that now. That's okay. I'm happy with my role as sort of some sort of elder statesman, just reminding the kids that they don't know they're born,
and to get off your lawn.
Yeah, absolutely. If I had a lawn.
Well, exactly. So this has not only has it, like you say, the AI, it's also got a 2-player versus mode.
Yeah.
It's got a puzzle mode as well, which I was quite intrigued by.
Yeah. So the main reason that number 2 is my favourite is actually it's got one mode that none of the other games in the series have got.
Right.
So the puzzle mode is cool, and that stayed with the series all the way through. The most recent version of this I've got, the only other version of this I've got now, I think, is the Xbox Live Arcade version from about 2009.
Yeah.
It was called Puzzle Bobble Live, and if you like the sound of this game, having listened to this podcast, Puzzle Bobble Live will fulfill your needs. It's a nice version of the game. It plays well. It looks pretty. It's got achievements. It's got high scores, all that sort of thing.
Yeah.
But the reason that I particularly chose Buster Move 2 Arcade Edition and have kept a copy of it, I've still got a PS1. It's a chipped PS1 from 1995 or 6 or whatever. Nearly all the games that I did have on it that I kept it for have now I've either got them on download as PSN games, or they've been re-released on something else, or I play them on the Vita. So physical disc copies of PS1 games, I'm now down to 3.
Okay.
One is Ape Escape, the first Ape Escape.
Fantastic.
And that's actually my girlfriend's copy of that game.
Oh, right. Okay. So you can't get rid of that even if you wanted to.
Can't get rid of it, no. But it is a game that we've talked about potentially covering on Cane and Rinse in the future. So so it's worth keeping it for that as well.
Yep.
The second one is a Namco arcade machine. The PlayStation 1 Japanese only version of Mr. Driller G, the sequel to Mr. Driller, and that was a gift from a friend when he was in Japan. And it's a 2-player Mr. Driller game, which is not always available on Mr. Driller. So that one. And my third game is Buster Move 2. And the reason I've kept this one game, this is because of 2 things. One is because of this time attack mode. Time attack mode is the only game in the entire series with time attack, and it's my favourite mode.
Okay.
It's a set of stages and they're against the clock, and it's as simple as that. But not only can you play, you can either play it 1 or 2 player. You play them through in a sequence. I can't remember exactly how many levels there are, but it's quite a few.
Yeah.
And it records your personal top 5, I think it is, times or times for every stage as you go through.
Okay.
And I think the reason, not only did I enjoy it because the competitive versus mode, I would normally thrash my opponent.
That's it. Yeah. Once you know it, and you're so practiced at it. Someone who hasn't played it as much, you're just always going to trounce them.
Exactly.
Surely. Yeah.
So time attack, it was a bit more like sometimes people could just fire, because some of them are just like fire one bubble, and if you get it right first time, you'll win the stage, and and your time will be recorded, kind of thing. So yeah, I used to play this so much. The other reason I've kept this specific physical copy, now this is a PAL version of this game. It's a rubbish PAL conversion as well. It's bordered and slow. It's not 60 hertz. But I've got a memory card. I've got a memory card with a save game that goes back to these days, and it still has all the names on it from back then.
Fantastic.
So there's names on it on this high score table, and it's only 3 letters. It's classic arcade, so I'm always RAT, R-A-T.
Brilliant.
But it's also got it's got more than one girlfriend from my life
Right.
who got high scores and levels. It's got friends that I do see still. It's got friends that I don't see anymore. So it's like this sort of odd historical
time capsule
document.
Yeah.
So that's why I know I'm sort of the way I'm talking
that.
about this is makes it almost sound like it's a kind of, it should be on my all-time favourites, but actually there are some things of the game itself.
To get rid of that game would be like throwing away old diaries and pictures from
totally.
from when you were young. That's just
that's it.
It's so sentimental. It's not even ridiculous. It's just ridiculous.
Yeah, totally.
That's brilliant. I love that. That is such a story that I just never thought I would get out of a match 3 puzzler. That's brilliant. That's absolutely brilliant. So, what is it about Puzzle Bobble Bust a Move that keeps it just outside your all-time list?
That is a very good question, and something that I've thought about, knowing that I was coming on here. So I do like these games, as you commented. I like very sort of instant hit arcade fare. I like pixel art. Clearly, it ticks a lot of boxes in that regard. I think I think there's a couple of reasons why I wouldn't necessarily think of it when I'm thinking up. I came up with like 20 odd games for my all-time favourites, and this one would probably not come up. And I think the first reason is that it is at its core incredibly simple. Now, I can still happily play it on Xbox Live Arcade. I could fire up that version now and have a fun time playing it. I could hook up the PS1 and play this, and I would still it would be enjoyable beyond the nostalgia of owning it. Right. But ultimately, I've played it a lot, and I feel like in some ways the actual buzz of completing levels has kind of diminished somewhat. Whereas many of my all-time favorite games, I still get an absolute thrill every time I load them up and every time I start playing them.
Okay.
And I think the other thing is that it kind of broke my heart a little that as the series went on, they took out that time attack mode, which I loved, and never put it back in. And I owned multiple versions of this on Dreamcast, on PS2, on PC, Xbox Live.
Oh, you're incredibly faithful.
Yeah, I mean, I stuck with it a long time. I bought various different incarnations and sequels, and I enjoyed them all to a point. I played the puzzle mode through, I played the versus mode, but without time attack. And then there were other issues, like, as I said, they started to over-egg the pudding. They started to put too many different bubble types, to the point that some of the purity of just matching colours became lost. There were some nice features as well. Some quite nifty gimmicks, but ultimately I just found myself wanting to play. I'll normally now play, if I play it, I'll play the Neo Geo original, the arcade version on MAME, probably ahead of all the other versions, because it's easiest just to stick that one and play it, and it's got some of the best music as far as I'm concerned as well. It's got some really classic, because the first game's from '94, so it's very much from sort of peak arcade 16-bit era, and it's I just love that sort of audio visual style. So I think it's a combination of those factors, but obviously, as you can tell, I've got an enormous affection for it. It's just in terms of games that I think everyone should play, if to call themselves a gamer or whatever, it probably wouldn't come in that list. But that said, as I say, I don't think anyone would not enjoy it. No. I remember leaving one of the aforementioned girlfriends who enjoyed this game at home. One day she was off work, I went to work, and I said, "Oh, you might enjoy this." And exactly as you said, I came home from work and she was still there in her pajamas, still playing this game. So that was
You're a bad influence, Mr. Cox.
Yeah. Well, didn't last, that relationship.
Fantastic. Right. So, as you've said, this game has universal appeal. So again, why pick this over something? There's so many match 3 games. There's like, just popping off the top of my head, there's like Super Puzzle Fighter or like a Puzzle Quest or something like that. What does this do that they don't do? I mean, is it just purely that instant gratification, kind of like you say, the time attack mode?
I think it's just, I mean, I love Puzzle Fighter 2, and in fact, that was one of the games that I considered for this podcast.
Right.
But I think the reason I chose Bust a Move 2 was partly because I had more, more to say about it.
Right.
But also, I think it's incredibly easy to understand. Like, it's incredibly immediate. Like, even Puzzle Fighter, as cool as that game is, and I really have played a heck of a lot of that over the years. I think maybe I would probably be more likely to play Puzzle Fighter now, either on the PSP version or the Xbox Live Arcade version, than I would Puzzle Bobble.
Right.
But in terms of introducing someone to a new game, I think the match 3, and it is literally just left, right, and fire. The only one extra, there are 2 extra controls that a lot of people miss,
right.
And they're completely optional. But if you use the shoulder buttons, the top ones, the bumpers, as it were, in modern parlance, they tweak your pointer 1 pixel each way.
Okay.
So you can just tap, tap, tap it until you're in exactly the right place. And up on the D-pad actually recenters your pointer right into the middle, which can save a bit of time. But
speed.
But beyond that, it is literally left, right, and fire. It's the purest of, talking about Space Invaders. It's that, but you don't even have to move or dodge anything.
Fantastic.
You are literally just pointing up.
Yeah.
And I should say, just firing bubbles up is one thing, but actually the real hook of this game, the thing that I think gives it its magic, is bouncing them off the wall.
I was going to say, banking a shot and getting it in the right position makes you feel godlike if you get it right.
Exactly. Yeah, especially if it's off 2. If you up the side and off the back, is incredibly satisfying, and equally it's incredibly frustrating when you get it wrong, because if you are a pixel out, it will stick to the wrong bubble.
That's what I'm saying. They're incredibly sticky, those bubbles.
They are very sticky.
Yeah. So a lot of this, you keep like everything you keep saying to me, it does feel like it's sort of influencing like more modern games, like going forward. Like the instant one you jump to is Peggle. It's the banking the shots off the walls, moving the turret. I think some of the puzzle modes you get like a line, you get the line to show you where you're going and stuff.
Yeah, guideline. Yeah.
Do you think that this influenced a lot of match 3 stuff? Going forward?
I think it probably did. I mean, at the time, we were only, I suppose this was released 10 years after the first version of Tetris was finished. And I suppose 5 years after Tetris had gone ballistic on the Game Boy.
Yeah.
Tetris was another game that was a legitimate phenomenon. And so various, arcade manufacturers and video game developers were looking to, sort of find something that had that accessibility, that simplicity, that sort of broad demographic appeal as well, because Tetris famously was a game that older people played and women played when we're going back to a time when video games were very much associated with young males. And I think Taito thought, right, well, let's I think they had a certain amount of crossover with Bubble Bobble because it was appealing, where a lot of the sort of traditional run and gun type games again played into the hands into the market of the sort of the teenage boy. So I think putting the more appealing characters and the jaunty sort of, there was nothing intimidating about
anything
it.
that looks sort of candy and sweet and lovely and kind
well
of,
that's it, the bubbles
like
do
the bubble
look
gum.
Delicious.
Exactly. So that will draw in the kids to spend their money.
And I think it did have broad appeal, and is that accessibility.
That's it.
And just the innate satisfaction of popping. It's also got the bubble wrap thing.
That's it.
I don't know if, I suppose I think you couldn't say that it wasn't an influence on lots of things that came after. I'm sure this did very well. At least the first 2 or 3 games did very well, and they kept doing well enough to support umpteen sequels. To the point that you can now play it on Facebook. It's been pretty ubiquitous for many years. Peggle's an odd one, but I quite like Peggle, and I've certainly lost many hours to Peggle. But Peggle always feels to me now. I know that top level players of Peggle will argue with this, but it always feels to me that there's a bit more kind of chance or random to it.
Now you're a slave to the physics.
Yeah, and it's obviously it's based on pachinko as well, whereas Puzzle Bobble really isn't. But obviously the left right arrow and fire and kind of Peggle's more a case of see what happens, unless as I say, I'm sure people are godlike.
People drawing maps on screens.
Yeah, you can get those. You can look at replays of high-scoring shots on the console versions. I think probably on the PC as well. And sometimes, like, my mind gets a bit blown, but you don't know how much of it is planning and how much of it is chance. But Puzzle Bobble is a pure skill game, really.
Yeah.
It's simple, but it is like honing a very particular and small set of skills. Yeah,
just playing it in a few hours I've played it, you can really see that it. If you put in the hours, you will get that feedback back in spades.
Yeah, absolutely.
So it's brilliant, absolutely brilliant. I was loving it, and you've now addicted my wife to it as well. So we're sitting there playing against each other, which is hilarious. Addiction. So it's another relationship ruined.
Oh, sorry about that. Easy come, easy go.
Exactly. So what would be your elevator pitch to try and sell someone who you'd spoke, this game had come up in conversation, and you go, you've got to play Bust a Move. How'd you sell it to them?
Tricky. I suppose it would be difficult to avoid just using something really obvious and glib, like it's
just buy it.
Just buy it. Super fun and addictive.
Yeah.
I suppose I would say. I suppose I'd try and say something like, I don't know, upside down Candy Crush, or try and bring in one of the modern touchstones that people would understand.
Yeah.
I mean, as you say, there are now a huge amount of very popular. I mean, the whole match 3 thing with Bejeweled and Candy Crush and all those things.
It's a mobile phenomenon, isn't it?
Yeah, it's ubiquitous. It's it has huge crossover appeal. Age and gender and everything else is, people play Candy Crush, people play Bejeweled. So I suppose I would, if I was Taito. I mean, actually, it's all owned by Square Enix. Square Enix now. So if they decided to try to, I imagine there are umpteen iOS and Android versions of this, but I always prefer playing these things on a big screen.
Yeah.
Upside down Candy Crush is not really quite right, but Candy Crush with dinosaurs, Bubble Space Invaders. I don't know.
Yeah, it's a tricky one. Yeah. It's a tricky one.
Adorable puzzle shooting action.
That's it.
Yeah,
Buy it. Buy it.
Play it.
That's it.
To play it is to love it.
Exactly. Right. Okay. So the blindside question. That isn't so blindside because I sent you the question beforehand. But who would you like to have on this show talking about their honourable mention game? Who would you pick?
I think again, this goes back to me being old and more kind of in tune and interested in the industry. As I say, more as interested and as passionate about the 80s and the 90s as I am about the now. I still play. I've been playing this year's Doom only this afternoon and loving it. I am not stuck in the past entirely. But I would very much like to hear Julian Rignall, the former Mean Machines, CMVG and Zap64 editor. He now lives and works in America. He still writes about video games. I can't remember which site. I have had a number of Twitter interaction with him. He's very friendly. He was
on US Gamer, or he was on Retronauts at least. I know he speaks with those guys a lot. I've heard him on there a couple of times.
Well, there you go. He always comes across. He lived in Brighton for a period until the commute him that was when he was working in Farringdon Lane. But occasionally I used to go down the arcades and play Galaga 88, which was obviously a sequel to Galaga, also an adorably cute sort of take on that genre. And sometimes I would go down there and it would say JAZ, and it would be some insane 135 billion score that was completely, and I knew that Julian Rignall had been down the arcades that
Amazing.
day. I'd love to hear from him. As I say, I've found him quite amenable on Twitter, but I haven't as yet had the pluck to ask him to come on one of my podcasts. So if you get him, then
that's it. I'll make an idiot of myself first, so you don't have to
soften him up.
Thanks, mate. Appreciate that. There's a bus. Oh look, I've thrown you under it. That's brilliant.
It'll be fine.
It'll be fine. Fingers crossed. We can get Jazz Rignall. He's at least from this country partially. We've got a chance. We've got a chance.
Yeah.
So we're rapidly approaching the end of the show. So have you got anything to promote or anyone to promote? Because obviously Cane and Rinse is, I said it on the James Carter show, I think it is the greatest podcast to come out of the UK, full stop, the end. So again, have you anything to promote, sir?
We've got a podcast called Cane and Rinse. We're actually at the time of recording, and probably I assume at the time this show will come out, we're on a sort of annual break because we do 50 shows in a row, 50 weeks. And then we have a few weeks off to like see our families and stuff. It's a very time intensive.
I was going to say it seems like a lot of work. I mean, like you say, you're really having to. You're not just playing the games and talking about them. You are deep diving into those games, aren't you?
We really do, and it's the thing. We set it up 5 years ago now, and it's gone really, really well. It's still growing. It's the thing that I've done that I'm the most proud of. I sort of nominally manage it. It's kind of, it wouldn't exist without my right-hand man, Jay.
Yep.
But and Tony and the team as well are absolutely integral to it. But it's been the fruition of a brainchild that I had when I found myself between podcasts many years ago.
Exactly. I was a Gamer Dork. I was a Gamer Dork guy.
Sure.
That was literally the second podcast I ever listened to.
Really?
The first three I listened to, I was saying this to David Turner's, was Joypod,
yes,
then Gamer Dork,
yeah,
then Super Happy Fun Time Show. And I've now had all three of you on this podcast. So I am just in heaven. That's it. It's brilliant. It's like meeting your heroes. It's amazing.
Wow.
So that's absolutely brilliant. But I have to say, I've met you guys at like a couple of Euro games and a few meetups and stuff, like in different pockets. Because obviously I know you don't sort of go to those kind of things a lot and whatever. And you're all the most approachable, lovely bunch of people I've ever met. You know, like I know you get however many downloads you get and stuff, and for you to all to just you're just the nicest people. Like you just let me like James and Dares and Tony, like hilarious. I've got a picture of Tony where he basically stole my phone and just went around taking random pictures of himself. And that kind of thing, and it's just I just think all you guys are just brilliant, and
that's very kind. I am very we are very lucky. We found a really good bunch of people, and it wouldn't have lasted as long without the commitment and the general sort of community spiritedness of everybody. It's a great thing. Keeps us going in dark times and all that sort of stuff.
Fantastic.
CaneandRinse.com.
I'll put that up. That's like a type underneath you if it was a video podcast. Brilliant. So here we are at the end of the podcast. So I'm terrible at these, so I'm just going to get out of here. But I just want to say a massive, massive thank you for coming on. It's been an honour, and hopefully I'll get to speak to you again very soon.
My pleasure. Anytime.
Cheers. Thank you. I've got to admit, when Leon told me he wanted to talk about a match 3 puzzler, I really worried we weren't going to be able to chat about it for more than 15 minutes before I had to wrap up the show. But here we are, 45 minutes later, and I'm sure you agree, his honourable mention is a superb choice. If you've enjoyed this or any other episode, please do leave us a review on iTunes. And if you have any feedback or comments on this or any other episode in this series, please do get in contact with me on Twitter at ch4zzee or via email at theaibots.com. Thanks for listening.